Welcome to another episode of the Getting Defensive podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good evening, Jerry. How are you, sir?
So good it hurts. It's been a hell of a week, but I'm, as you would say, above ground, so I can't complain too much.
Yes, for those following you on social media, about the time we're recording this, your son and your daughter-in-law have had some crazy car issues. But
yes, they have.
Hopefully
We'll be behind that, and it's a better day. It's a new day, and we're on the right path. But we have a great guest today, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce her.
Yeah, and before we get too far into it, just a quick disclaimer.
Oh, thank you.
If you want to give.
Yes, the thoughts and opinions we all express on the show are ours and do not represent those of our employers necessarily.
Right. But our guest is self-employed, so maybe it does. We'll see. Anyway,
it's true.
We're very excited to have Liz Wharton on the show today, and everybody gets an intro. So I'll give you Liz's intro, and it's bear with me because it's impressive, and this is just the highlights. So I even wrote it down to get it right. So Liz is a well-known figure in the cybersecurity and legal fields, recognized for her work at the intersection of technology, law, and policy. You've got a background in law. You've become a key voice in addressing the legal challenge posed by emerging technologies, cybersecurity incidents, and data privacy issues. You've held numerous C-level executive roles, and most recently before your current gig. You've got over 15 years experience in the areas of legal public policy, business leadership. You earned your JD in 2003 from Georgia State University College of Law, and your BA in Communications and International Relations from Virginia Tech. Some of your key previous roles include as a senior assistant city attorney for the city of Atlanta, responsible for advising Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, busiest one in the world, by the way, on technology policy and projects, including the first of its kind airport UAS safety risk assessment on the integration of drones into airfield operations and development of a UAS standard operating procedure. You also served on the immediate incident response team for the City of Atlanta's 2018 ransomware incident, which was a whole lot of fun for everybody. You've also served as the VP of Operation for Sky, the computer security company focused on adversary emulation, for a number of years. Currently, founder of her own firm, Silver Key Strategies, where she offers advisory consulting, fractional COO and CISO services, as well as all the amazing policy and speaking and whatnot you give. Finally, frequent and sought-after speaker at many conferences and podcasts, often quoted in a variety of print and online publications, recognized as the 2022 Cybersecurity Privacy Woman Law Professional of the Year by the United States Cybersecurity Alliance. How'd I do? What'd I miss?
I mean, I'm exhausted just hearing that. I'm like, wow, who's that awesome person?
I feel like I'm slacking. It's really, I read this.
I feel very inadequate right now.
But welcome to the show, Liz. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And I'd say along the lines of disclaimers, I am a lawyer. Unless you're one of my clients, I am not your lawyer. And I consider it not legal advice, but random musings of someone who's had too much coffee today.
All right. Well, that kills about 18 questions I had about this fence situation I've got with my neighbor going on that I was going to... Fine. We won't talk about it.
You're just framing the question wrong. I mean, it's not legal advice. It's if there was a hypothetical CISO and the adjacent company was pooping in there. I mean, we could have some fun with it. Departments, another division in the company, hypothetically.
Right.
Excellent.
Right.
Allegedly. Rumor has it.
Indeed. So any key things from your background that you're working on now that we should tee off from your intro that I missed? Because I know you do a lot of advocacy and volunteer work, And anything you want to mention there?
Well, thank you for teeing it up so
Yeah.
well, because shout out to the Rural Tech Fund,
Oh.
which is Chris Sanders had started it many years ago. It is a nonprofit. They're going to be gearing up for the annual Golden Ticket and fundraising year-end drive. But when we talk about how do we build the next generation, how do we inspire students, Rural Tech Fund has provided funding for students. Teachers come to them and say, hey, we have a challenge. Either can we get software, 3D printers? Can you mentor? Can you do all this? They've provided and helped students in STEM in all 50 states, including Alaska, Hawaii. Like, if you can think of it, they've done that. And it's an organization that Chris came up with on his own, self-funded, now 501c3. But yes, so keep an eye out for that. And thank you in advance. And full disclosure, I'm on the advisory board, but it is just an awesome mission.
Where can
Very
people
build the
learn more?
next.
Where can people learn more about that?
Go on the website, and I want to say it's ruralrtf.org. But if I've misspelled it, please don't tell Chris. And Chris, if you're listening, sorry. Still, I promise I'll just throw in an extra donation.
Very good.
But I'll give y'all the website. You can put it in the show notes.
That
sounds great. All right. You recently gave hosted a panel discussion at RSA about vulnerability disclosure programs. So what would you say our listeners should know about that discussion, or take away from that discussion?
Well, particularly with that, like the framework behind it, was what happens when you're in a heavily regulated industry. In this case, the panel included Casey with Bug Crowd, and then we had Richard come in, who works for an airline. So you have aviation is such a highly regulated industry. You've got multiple folks coming in. So how do you create innovative programs like a bug bounty that says, hey, it's bigger than, how do we establish those constraints? And the biggest part of it was getting the engagement and buy-in of leadership and really getting champions across different factors within and groups within the company that are excited about it. Because again, as anyone knows, across the board, if you come up with an idea, even if you get the budget, that's great. Now what? You have the money and nobody's going to do it. Everyone's going to roll their eyes, and they're there, it's going to go nowhere. So part of what they did was identify where are the potential issues within an airline. What are some low-hanging fruit? What's something we can do? How do we get everyone engaged? And let's start small. Let's take this elephant down one bite at a time and go for it from that approach.
It was a very interesting discussion. I previously worked in a fairly heavily regulated entity, not
Hey guys,
airline.
I'm so sorry. Can we pause for a second? I've got a cat issue afoot.
Oh.
Give me 1 second.
Sure.
I think the cat just needs to be on camera.
I think what we need to do is get another camera, and we can have the cat have its own window.
Yeah.
I think it's great. Actually, I love the idea. So Andy, we decided you were away.
Yes.
We decided something while you were away.
Okay.
That the cats need their own feed. We need. So there's 3 of us now. There actually needs to be more. We're going to have a permanent one for the cats.
I think that's a brilliant idea.
It's going to differentiate us in the market.
You understand that they're absolutely going to get more followers much more quickly than we will.
But look, we can ride on their coattails. It's going to be great.
or
And the side eye and shade that they're going to throw just in general. Mm. Hmm.
It's gonna be, it's
yeah.
gonna be grand.
Yeah.
Sorry
So
for the interruption. Apparently, there was a minor cat emergency, but we're handling it.
it is all it is all good. I have my own,
So
as do many of us. Um,
anyway, okay.
so so my question, where I was going, I used to work for a pretty heavily regulated company. It was regulated by bank regulators, not by airline regulators.
Hmm.
And certainly, I experienced a lot of reservations, and I called it like hesitation by proxy. Like there was concern about how regulators would interpret engaging in that kind of a program, rather than necessarily. I felt like there was always this hesitation to actually go and broach it, and I don't know if that came out directly in your discussions, but I'm interested to hear from you. Like, do you perceive that regulators themselves are often an inhibitor, or is it really just companies or organizations, not kind of being very conservative and not wanting to upset the apple cart, so to speak?
A little bit of both. And part of where the airlines were approaching it was okay, what are things that are not going to involve everything? So, what are the regulators focused on and, dabbling even in the privacy? So, what are some of the systems? What is that low hanging fruit of like, okay, yeah, how do we define with any bug bounty? You've got to be able to define these are the parameters. We're going to articulate them very clearly, and please don't show off and go rogue. But when you're talking about banks, you look at, okay, what are all the different platforms? What are all the different things we're providing? And what are some of the aspects that, okay, if we're not talking about the PII aspect of it, but we're talking about the connectivity, or we're talking about different pieces of it, then can we section that off and get everybody comfortable with
Mhm.
how that works? Or, all right, let's see what vulnerabilities we can find just in the website, because you're not supposed to be storing certain information in the website. And I say this because I have learned very quickly, even with other companies, as I'm sitting there in the engineering room, like discussions where I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe we should talk about that. Maybe we should, hmm, yeah,
So
I
what you're
like
saying
that
is it's an
approach.
aspiration to not store it there.
It's kind of like, say, at an airport when you provide Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi to anyone coming within range of stuff. Ideally, you're clicking and an I acknowledge
Mhm.
that you're doing this in an individual. For example, the leaseholders, the retailers, for example, who deal with payment, card processing, stuff
Sure.
like that, agree that they're going to find a different way to process the payments.
Rather than on your free public Wi-Fi.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then you find out when you have to take the free public Wi-Fi offline, because let's just say hypothetically there's a ransomware attack and you have it and you're in the immediate things, and you start getting these very angry messages.
You learn
Um,
things. You've learned things.
you do.
Hmm.
You do. Like you start seeing things that add some gray hairs. So keep that in mind when you're coming up with ideas for the bug bounty and that feedback. You're probably going to learn some stuff that you might not have thought you were going to learn that day.
Yeah, I mean,
What-
So
I, I,
it gets
I
fun.
work with in my current role without getting into details. We have a public bug bounty, and we have a very specific scope. But it's interesting how often things come in that are outside of scope. That you know what, that's kind of interesting that we wanted to know anyway. But we don't necessarily want you to like keep going down that path because you're going to break production. But thank you for letting us know. And here's some
Yeah.
bounty anyway, even though it was outside the scope. But we want to reward some folks for respectfully and appropriately finding and reporting things to us. But yeah, it can be a challenge.
Well, and that's one of the other challenges, both from a researcher perspective,
Mhm.
but even within a company. And those conversations is giving each other grace, and coming in and understanding that maybe you found something, maybe it wasn't under your umbrella of responsibilities, maybe it's the adjacent group working on. But keep in mind when you're going and telling someone their baby's
Yeah.
ugly, that you are telling them their baby's ugly. You may be frustrated. You may think, God bless, like, son of a biscuit. Y'all should have known better. You should have, and it's like, yeah, we all could have, should have, would have. Um, but pause, find a productive way to communicate, or save the snark for when you get home, or in your car, and then be like, God, that what, like, their elevator doesn't go to the top floor, but that's the quiet part you keep to yourself.
That's fair. Uh, do you think it's viable for companies to build like a representative QA or demo or environment for their researchers to poke at, as opposed to poking at any sort of production environment?
I hope they have. What I'm trying to think, what was the um recent, they were just like, wow, y'all pushed that update
Oh,
live.
CrowdStrike.
You cross,
CrowdStrike,
I mean,
yeah.
but it's not even the first time that's
Yeah.
happened. I mean, way back in, like, I want to say 2010, McAfee
Mhm.
had an
Mhm.
update that went out, and it a lot of state governments, including one I was working for at the time, were suddenly like, "Is this malware? Is this?" I'm like, "No, it's just shoddy code release, like nothing nefarious."
Any sufficiently advanced bug can be mistaken for malware.
Oh my god! Right, right. Well, and talking about, like, looking at and avoiding uh, going out and saying, like, oh, it was the Russians, it was an APT, it was a salty volt electric typhoon panda. Absolutely, that was doing that. Most of the incidents that happen, especially in aviation or anyone that's using electricity, it's Agent Cyber Squirrel.
Right.
It is nothing more than shoddy code that got pushed out, uh, failure to have redundancies set up, and the squirrel sacrificed himself to the greater, I don't know.
Self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah, yeah, like it was not nefarious or even intentional.
But it sounds better when you present it to the board that it was, you know,
Yeah, it was inevitable. It was
right.
inevitable.
There's
It's
nothing we could have done.
Yes,
super advanced attack.
Right.
Well, nothing
but
we could do.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes that's the flowery language. You can be kind of careful how you present it, because you're presenting it to a board that may or may not, or even at that VP or like legal team level, you're using words have meaning, and they're going to have different meanings in different contexts. And so going and saying, well, it was inevitable. Well, are we talking, was this an act of God? Because if it's an act of God, other than saying it in your perfect, like, Jake and Elwood Blues Brothers Chicago accent, act of God may push it outside of your insurance coverage,
Oops.
because it's an act of God. It
Mm.
was inevitable. Apologies to anyone on my poor accents, but and some folks are finding that out the hard way in some of the recent SEC filings and stuff. Of
Yeah.
like, yeah, just be careful what you say, because us lawyers and the C-suite, and even sometimes the PR marketing team, they're going to take what you say and just expect them to run in a completely different direction. Much like when you took your product and gave it to the, like, POC folks for that first QA test, and you're like, wait, no, that you're not, no, why are you clicking there? Why are, no, why did you just connect it to, oh, yeah, uh, yeah.
Reminds me of the classic video that it goes in the square hole.
Right.
Yes, yes, and they can all fit in. Well, if you were determined enough to do and just know that sometimes it may bork everything. Other times it may just be a very, very expensive penalty, fine, and all of the above.
So
In addition to the borking.
I had one more question, and I want to pivot to something else, but I had one more question on bug bounties. In that panel discussion, one of the I would say big threads, overarching threads in the discussion was challenges around contracting. And so you being an attorney, I'm interested to get your perspective on how significant of a headwind should that be in the context, because if you for example hire a penetration testing company to come out and do an engagement, you have terms and conditions and limits of liability and all kinds of baloney. But in the context of this, like the people who are actually doing the test are basically freelancers, right?
I don't think lawyers consider that baloney, by the way, Jerry. I think they consider it.
Well, that was my attempt. That was my attempt to use a legal term.
Oh,
yes. And the few times I mistakenly was put in charge of drafting court briefs, have I used phrases like that? Plethora was one of my favorite ones to use because I really wanted someone to ask if I knew what a plethora meant. But that does, not only do you have to think about the like parameters that you're putting, but also what happens to that information. Because I've seen it from the researcher side. One of the quickest things to look at is, okay, is this being used as a way to potentially shut down further research into that topic from me? So I'm going to submit this, and Casey's been working on Disclose.io. You can find some really good. So for companies that are looking at bug bounty programs, look at some of the organizations that are putting out free versions of policies that have been vetted, used, and don't reinvent the wheel. Start from somewhere, both from the company side, because you inevitably don't want to, like, is your intent to shut down further research into that? Probably not, but maybe. In which case, go for it. Okay. But the other thing is, from, again, that researchers, what does this mean? Am I never going to be able to talk about these cool things I found? Or can, like, I understand we're going to go the responsible disclosure, which really isn't responsible because it's responsible from who? It's okay, fine. I'll try adulting for a minute. But pretty soon the joy of that's going to wear off. But that the collaborative disclosure, like, I'm going to tell you about this, and let's be reasonable. This is not a ticket, a get out of jail free card. Y'all don't have to fix this. No, you have to fix it. And I'd like to be able to, if it's, is not going to contravene safety or other issues, like, I'd like to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
But work together. Like, why not? If nothing else, your PR folks will eventually thank you, because it's a way to say, like, look how proactive, look how we are protecting our consumers, because we're actively finding things. We're working with the research community to improve safety, privacy. I don't know.
Those are really good talking
They'll find
points.
a way to spin it.
Yeah, it's a good talking point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember way back in the day, Jerry, you and I were at ISS, and there was some talk that one of our researchers was going to give at, I think, DEF CON. And a whole bunch of company representatives, was it Cisco? I think, wow. I really should have researched this.
So.
take this with a grain of salt, was basically threatening all sorts of legal doom and gloom and epic amounts of fallout if this talk went forward and it got ugly. But I'd like to think that the industry's gotten a little better since then, and people realize that this is a coexistence through peaceful exchange is better than not talking about these things or trying to hide these things. And it's kind of like now everybody's kind of got ransomware, so maybe that scarlet letter is a little less red than it used to be at one point.
Well, that, and there are a lot of whistleblower programs that are being introduced from, we talk about the heavily regulated, like there are more ways to go about it now and get the, put it, what is it, shine the sunlight. Sunlight is the best disinfectant sometimes. But as one who flies, I would prefer that people be given an opportunity to fix it first, then talk about it, rather than like, oh, look, you disclosed on the laptop cell phone product that I use every day without any, like, oh, thanks.
Without giving the vendor an opportunity to put out a patch or anything.
Yeah. And there are a lot of those conversations, and you're right. I mean, at this point, pretty much everybody. I mean, which one of us doesn't have free credit monitoring and sets of steak knives from all of the, I mean, at this point, everyone at Thanksgiving dinner is going to have their own set of steak knives.
Indeed. Jerry, did you have anything to follow up with there? I'm sorry, I don't want to switch the topic on you too fast.
No, I think we can switch to the next topic.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you mentioned SEC, and one thing we've been watching this week, and you might have some insight into, is the SEC finding 4 companies for not apparently accurately, maybe we'll use that word, disclosing their impact by solar winds. And that might be one of the first times I know of that companies have been fined for not disclosing their impact of some other companies, in this case, supply chain attack. And don't know if you saw that or had any thoughts around that from a legal and policy perspective.
I mean, SolarWinds is just the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, it's like at some point, what happens in Vegas was supposed to stay in Vegas, but not anymore. I mean, we're going back to an event that happened in 2020, the SEC coming out in 2024, finding them for disclosures that these companies made back in 2021 and 2022. And to loop it in, it's not just the disclosure, because they made them. And for folks who like to play the data game, the SEC for year to date, as of today, date of recording, or at least the date, I think it was the night before the SEC updates their EDGAR filing system data, there were, getting the number absolutely correct, 35,825 8Ks filed this year.
Wow.
And the reason I use that was because it's kind of a boom number. But in this case, the SEC was finding these companies not for their 8Ks per se, but because that cyber disclosure rule only went into effect at the end of 2023. But they're saying, hey, your annual filings, your annual report where you're supposed to vomit on the page and give all of the investors and the market really a glimpse into stuff. Yeah, you kind of glossed over. You yada what was a very public, and like you knew these were serious incidents. You knew that it was impacted. Everyone knew, because at this point, again, you're thinking like, it was in the news. I mean, people knew who'd been impacted. They knew it was this. And going back even to the conversation earlier, like in some cases, the incident response, the CISO, that engineering side, that side of the house, were knee deep in it. And the questions were whether they had properly moved it up the food chain.
Ah.
And so that the people, when I say the people, the lawyers, the finance team that were writing these disclosures had the right information.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did they know? Had you disclosed? And where that breakdown was, I haven't seen, but it kind of hit home a little bit. Because it was like, all right, did legal screw it up?
Right.
Did they go into legal and tell them, and legal said, so what you're saying is it's only a minor? Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste from this last one? Or you're going to use this flowery coulda, maybe, I don't know, instead of like, dude, you've got the bullet hole. Like, you're bleeding out. I'd say you need to worry about getting shot. Like, now you're worried, like, you've been shot.
Right.
Like, we are bleeding data. It's not a, well, that's a dangerous area after dark. No.
So, I mean, a couple things could have happened there, right? It could have been that the technical people didn't explain it well enough to legal and compliance, and it could have been that they did, and somebody in legal or whatnot decided to downplay it for whatever reason. Could have been somebody at the executive rank saying, we don't want this to be as bad of a disclosure. I mean, there's a couple of possibilities here, right? Of how this could have happened. And that's an interesting, I mean, people obviously have known for years that technical people sometimes aren't the best communicators. So, that is interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it's, what's funny is a lot of these filings are absolute, even the annual reports. I mean, we're talking in some cases hundreds of pages of graphs and charts, and then it gets condensed down and condensed down. And if you look at, and especially one fun little project, if anyone's so inclined, again, the SEC makes all of its data easily accessible. What format do you want it? Download it, play with it, have at it. Running these filings through LLMs, people have been copying and pasting the same thing for, I mean, every single, down to, I ran some of them through a couple models I have access to, and I can tell you even which lawyers at the law firms probably drafted them because they've used the same stuff every time. And hey, great if you're not getting charged for that.
Right.
But it's, going through both that aspect, but so for each of the, and if people want to take a deeper dive, they can go look at the SEC put out a press release, linked in the press release on this, where the 4 companies, each of them, their agreements that they said, where the SEC lays out, this is what we found. And in them, they're saying it was a little bit of both or all of the above. And now I'm off the top of my head, one of them actually got dinged for both the reports, but also their internal compliance. They didn't have sufficient controls.
I think that was Mindcast. I think that was Mindcast.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you've got some where it was like, okay, it wasn't just your annual; it was your quarterly reports and your AKs and as you're also getting publicly, but they even went down so far as to say you had logs that you were investigating and looking into, and in some cases they let them expire, or like they were deleted. They didn't start looking at them. So again, the event happened 2020. They're not looking at them until 2022, and oopsie,
right?
Oh gosh, we don't have all that. Like, seriously, dudes, like.
Yeah,
that's malarkey.
The data.
That is absolute malarkey. And but then the SEC also went further and said, in some cases, you didn't move it up the food chain far enough. And so you do have that, like, did they put it in the appropriate, like, no, it's on fire. Like, we've been shot. We're bleeding. This is not a hypothetical anymore. This is, and so for me, it really hit home because I try to drive this with each of the companies I'm working with, especially if they're in the product phase. I'm only half kidding. I said, please, if you're developing stuff, can I just add me to the calls. Let me listen in to this. I said, mute me. Don't even give me access rights to, chime in, but can I just hear these words? Because can I just hear the thought process so that I become familiar, so that I can tell when we've gone off the
Yeah.
rails, or I can, like, oh, hey, that's something I probably need to put in one of the agreements that we're about to do. Or like, hey, I need to put together a disclosure that we're doing because we're about to go after some funding. I probably need to highlight that, because you get away with a lot if you vomit on the page. Like, if you put it out there, then people just go, okay, yeah, no, everybody's been ransomed at this
Especially at
point.
this point. Especially at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was just thinking too about some companies have this culture of bad news isn't well accepted or wanted to be heard or welcomed by senior leadership. And I wonder how much of that mentality of don't bring me problems, bring me solutions, and make sure all my check marks look green when I report to my upper auditors. I wonder how much that might play
Yeah.
in.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and there are certain, how do you navigate
Mm-hmm.
that? And really, this is where I pour one out and tip my hat to both you and Jerry and all the other folks listening that have to navigate that. Like, yeah, they're already screaming over something else. How do I bring this in? And part of so I joined or moderated a panel at ShmooCon last
Mm-hmm.
year that really looked into that, of like, yeah, how do you? And we had a board, Cindy Gula, who sits on multiple boards. Like, all right, Cindy, how do people talk to you?
Yeah.
How do they need to frame the language to get you to listen, and raise it above? Because the noise floor may be at a certain level. How do I break through? But also, how do I insulate myself as the CISO, or as the junior, engineer, dev, or person who, like, dude, this is above my pay grade.
Yeah.
How do I document that I've reported it and gave it the proper color? Like, oh yeah, no, this is just smoldering. But, or like, no, we're the meme. We are the meme sitting there drinking our coffee at the table as the room is now burning around us. Like, how so I mean, I don't envy y'all having had to figure that out in prior roles. I mean, I'm sure you've perfectly figured it out at this point in your careers.
Time it was
Totally.
I
Mhm.
almost
Nailed it.
mystically
Mhm.
perfect. No, not at all.
Yeah, nailed it. So in another article that you were quoted in about the recent CDK breach, which
I mean, there's
was
just so many breaches. Pick one.
that one I think was very interesting to me, because it really highlighted that kind of the dichotomy between how different organizations, at least in my estimation, interpret the word material. Right. And so what we just talked about is the perhaps, and I'm not sure, each of the four companies appears to have a slightly different issue. Checkpoint, for example, didn't admit any wrongdoing. They acknowledged that there was some materiality, but they didn't really acknowledge any wrongdoing, though they are going to pay the fine.
Mhm.
And so I think
Yeah.
the discussion
All
we
of them
just
did that.
the discussion that we just had was, we have to make sure that message, the significance of whatever happened, is bubbled up to the top. But when I read the CDK one, and having been in boardrooms and been a CISO and whatnot, I am left wondering if there is an opportunity for all of that plumbing to have worked correctly, and for a company like CDK to still conclude, yeah, it was like it happened. But in the scheme of, and I guess it wasn't actually CDK, because CDK themselves isn't a public company, it's their holding company. But in the
Mm-hmm.
scheme of things, it isn't material to us because like the whole company could burn to the ground and it still would just be a
Mm-hmm.
flea on a gnat's back, a gnat on a dog's
Yeah.
back. And um, so whereas the company the customers of theirs who are much more reliant on the product or the offering services and whatnot that CDK offered, like they were in mass reporting material issues to the SEC, and that was kind of the big dichotomy was your customers are telling the government that like this is a big material issue, and you are saying no, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. And I mean, so much so to the point, like, the confusion swirls to the point where even the SEC themselves have had to come out and release memos to say it's not like, guys, on the one hand, cool it, but on the flip side, you've been dealing with the defined term material in 8Ks. Like 8Ks are nothing new. It's
Mhm.
35,000 plus this year. And you can amend it. You can absolutely amend, and please do. Like if you go, like if your first gut reaction is, oh, this is a big deal. Like, oh, but then you have a chance to kick the tires. You're like, yeah, it wasn't amend. Take it back. Like, like dial it in and file it. But yeah, it's fascinating when you look at the economic, like what are we using to determine material? And is it the economic impact to a company, to the bottom line? Is it, okay, we're going to lose about 10% of our customers? Or are we the sole source provider for that industry? Going back to like the airline aviation, there's one company that provides the load balancing software or that's approved by the FAA to do that because of the testing stuff. And so what are your options? Like you're gonna like, I'm never using your store again. Like, really? Because we're the only store in town. Like, okay, Karen. But to the companies, it's their, so I think that's, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's, what is it? Because again, all of those disclosures are only for public companies.
Mhm.
But we're seeing the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, is starting to come in and go, oh, really? Really? Is this a consumer product? Like, are you harming stuff? You're looking at other, so there are other avenues. Like,
Mm.
while the SEC is having a moment, and good for them, there are others, there are state actions, there are things you can do, but who should that burden be on? And, is this the best route? But yeah, CDK was just a bananas example of, yeah, nope. I mean, you look at some of the studies, even we were only joking about ransomware impact. Most companies rebound within like 6 months, if that, like if even that. I mean, look at CrowdStrike
Right.
and look at some of the, like, dudes, y'all like borked everything, and up, we're good. We're
Yeah.
good. I mean, Microsoft and different stuff that they have, like, yep, nope, still gonna use it, still gonna do it. Like, okay.
Yeah, I think I saw CrowdStrike stock had recovered almost all of what it lost already,
Oh yeah.
which is pretty telling from what the market thinks of these situations. But it sounds like we need very technical lawyers helping these companies, though. Like,
Well,
I could see a lot of
it's,
opportunity
I mean,
for
of
confusion.
course.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. Well, and think about like how many times you've tried to take some of these complex ideas, and you can get into the weeds, but what is that high level? And so to some degree, I love that idea because that's what Silver Key, shameless plug, I mean, that's part of what I'm doing, is helping companies either internally, like inwardly looking, or externally, like, all right, how do we take these complex ideas and are we looking at them from the contracting,
Hmm.
the compliance, there's been a lot of projects that I have that are like, okay, let me translate that out of the engineering side and out of the like super secret and put that in condensable. But that's part of like, and Jerry, to your point earlier, I mean, that's part of how you have to, in the role of your, where you're sitting, maybe not at the C-suite, but that below of defending, and you're seeing all these data, you're seeing all the blinky lights. How do you prioritize yourself within your team, and then being able to say, okay, now how do I put on that other hat, or how do I do that? So legal, so looping legal in earlier rather than later is really one of the key takeaways. Find somebody in legal compliance, the risk side of things, that you can, like, I'd say, if we all worked in offices again, buy them coffee, get them donuts. Like, I'm not saying bribe them. I would never say bribe.
Build a rapport
But
with.
Show some
exactly. So that
appreciation with
yeah,
tangible
and
items.
likewise, exactly. And likewise, part of it is legal. It's like, hey, keep in mind, your role should not be no. Your role should not be this like big voice on high, like, okay, get off the power trip. Your job is to help the company do better and protect the consumers, protect, that's where you're going to be for like, all right, so this is happening. All right, well, what can we do? What are we doing? How can we need to get from point A to point B. All right, let me figure out how to navigate that and get you the products or the services or the data reporting that you need captured. How can I weave that into, do I weave it into contracts? I mean, it was one of the companies we were talking about with the fines. They didn't have policies and procedures to be able to escalate internally when it was their own stuff that was breaking.
Wow.
Like, they knew how to do it if it's a customer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They knew how to do it but they had nothing. So it's like, and I've seen this in a couple other incidents that, in working with security researchers, inevitably, not even with Silverkey, but with other projects I work on, I get to see a lot of how they're doing. And it's that victim notification. It's like, but internally, when it's like, oh, no, the call's coming from inside. And there really isn't a playbook as much for that. Or how does that escalate? Like, oh no, those are our devices. We had the person who misconfigured or didn't actually like use the shadow IT, or and then how do you bump it up the food chain?
Yeah. That's wild. So another topic, because I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we've been talking a lot of great stuff, but you've had a lot of interaction with like the Aerospace Village and other sort of intersection of aviation and security and privacy, which I find personally very interesting because, it's something I've known. In fact, we even got to go flying once, which was great.
I was going to say, I don't know if y'all bribe your guests, but, I would love to be able to observe things from a different vantage point than feet on the ground.
Elevation, different altitude.
Yeah, I would really like to be able to elevate the conversation.
Hypothetically speaking.
Right. But keeping it out of becoming a paid flight.
Right, of course.
Because FAA would not permit that under the private pilot's license.
No. And, that is something they take very seriously. So we don't mess around with that.
Yeah.
But you've had some amazing experiences. Any good stories or lessons learned as you've seen a very interesting, I think fairly rare intersection of all these things that I think a lot of people would find fascinating.
Yeah, much like doing, if you're ever doing a live demo or a presentation, you don't, if you're on stage, don't do the demo live, have a backup, and don't work with small children or live animals. Dead animals, maybe, maybe, but with
It is Halloween time.
one of the
Sorry.
it is, and one of the things that you can have all of the software updates, approvals, everything can be good to go. Let's say if you've invited the media because you're about to do one of the first authorized flight demonstrations of drones, and this was back in the day. We've shut down a runway at the world's busiest airport, which for those who to get that, there's a takeoff and a landing at Hartsfield Jackson every minute. And so, and this is, I mean, it's crazy, the schedule and the beautifully, like, it is a symphony and a ballet. It is a well-oiled machine when it works. But we, the vendor or the contractor who came was going to do the demo of the flights, and there was a software update pushed out the night before that didn't have the right configuration that would permit that particular off-the-shelf drone to fly in a heavily restricted airspace.
Oh, so it had like a Class B block.
It fired up. It started to go up, and then it immediately said, nope, this is a no-go. Boop, go back down. So we had a backup. We had other options, etc. But it was like one of those moments where you're just like, oh, that just happened. And so I guess that's a teachable moment of different stuff. And also, you never know what's going to happen until it's like you're in the middle of prepare.
Yeah.
Because when we did our safety risk assessment, anytime you've identified something as a danger to the airspace, to the safety, you have to then do a review.
Sure.
And I brought in researchers to meet to prep and plan to kind of lay the foundation so that when we start using some of these concepts with all the stakeholders, they would be prepared. But my instructions to them were, please don't make my people cry. So tone back. Don't tell them all the things. And they did a great job. They did tone it back. So I was like, please, if somebody leaves here in tears, I'm going to have to hear about it for a while, like forever, ever. So yeah, those were some of the fun things, nice. But that translate to, again, that how do you take these high concepts, technical concepts of, all these different communication, all the different anti-drone technologies, it's not going to work how you think it is. And how do you take those really fun hacks that we can do and put them into speak that we can put in a legal report or, get them to understand of like, yes, that could happen. But in reality, it's probably not. Like that's a proximity-based attack. You're really not going to see that. No. And by the way, if anyone has friends, family that work at airports, just know that their badge clearance may not get them as far as they think it will. And so if you are stuck on an airplane because of a power outage at the airport, your sister can only is cleared to get to the outside of the plane. She, in her defense, really could not do anything other than wave at you stuck on the plane. And if there were alcohol bottles and sealed containers, only wave those bottles. They could not be opened during working hours, etc.
Right. Although it does seem like that might be a prime opportunity to do an unscheduled test of the emergency evacuation systems of the aircraft.
That requires a high level of clearance that, but yes, there was lots of teachable moments.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of paperwork right there.
A lot of paperwork.
Lot of paperwork, forgetting that I need to articulate these side-eye faces. And yes, unfortunately, my rolling my eyes out loud doesn't always translate for everyone listening. That's fair. Apologies.
So in the spirit of not being disrespectful disrespectful of your time, I think we should probably start wrapping it up. I did want to just kind of summarize because I thought it was a very good discussion. I would say bug bounties are good. Start small.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily the most popular thing internally, but they are worth it. And then I would also say, with regard to the SEC discussion, that over communicating to the government during a breach is advisable, and that you need to ensure that you have processes to properly escalate security incidents internally, including up to the top if necessary. So, anything
Yeah.
you'd add to that?
I was gonna say, I mean, it really is, and it's not that you're over disclosing to the guy. It's just being intentional with the language, and don't let PR market the financing, because remember, they're looking at it through their lens, not your lens.
Right.
So if you're trying to save your own hide or protect your hide, your team, make sure that you've done what you can, then distill the information down, but don't gloss over. Let them do the glossing, but put it in a packaging that they truly can understand the depth of the issues, and then they'll disclose, but give them brief them intentionally.
Nice.
Fair point.
And bug bounties, there are programs that can help you. Never reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. Just build off of other people's work that has been successful.
So what I'm hearing is politely steal what works for somebody else.
Yeah, and pretty much. Yeah. Well, it's not even stealing. It's borrow, admire, and pay homage to, and then just fork the repo in GitHub.
There you go.
There you go. Before we go, I'd love to ask our guests, what else do you like to do in your spare time that isn't all this stuff? What else is your relief and release from all these deep, difficult topics? What are your hobbies?
Well, the hobby that keeps me from stabbing things I should not be stabbing is I did get back into running.
Oh, wow.
I do not run far. I do not run my days of half marathons are long over, but that is something that becomes me time, and does keep me from harming things that I should not be harming.
That's fair. I only run if there's something large and toothy and clawy chasing me. So I envy your discipline to do that. That's not something I do.
Again, I'm just trying to be less stabby.
That's fair. Maybe I should try it. I have not tried that option, but that's fair. Excellent. Well, hey, Jerry, anything else before we wrap up?
Nope. Thank you very much.
Liz, this was amazing. Anything you want to leave our audience of at least 4 people with, our key links, things you got going on, stuff you want them to know about, anything you want to promote or get some folks' eyes on? That was a great time.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you to everyone. Thank you to both of you for trusting me and bringing me in and sharing your audience with me. And always check out Silver Key Strategies. Let me know. Lawyer Liz on most of the socials, and Rural Tech Fund. But a lot of the stuff I also on my LinkedIn have been trying to, given the current job market and a rising tide lifts all ships, I try to post interesting positions that I come across. Or, for example, Bug Crowd has a platform where they list a lot of different open positions, not just within their organization. So come for the tea, and whatever I can do to help do that, I try. So check out the LinkedIn. I take no credit for those roles. I just try to pass on information. So if you have cool roles that you're looking to fill, let me know, and I will broadcast as I can.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
Thanks, Liz.
And timely, by the way.
Yeah, timely. That's true.
Right.
Somebody on this call may be a little underemployed at the moment.
It's true.
That is dangerous. For the protection of society and all kinds of things. We need to fix that so that you don't, like, idle hands tend to break, burn, and like, let's harness those evil
I
superpowers.
think you're right. We'll have to work on that. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Liz, for joining us. And hey, if you guys like the show, tell a friend. This is a new format for us. We're still kind of getting our feet under us, but hopefully you guys find this as amazingly interesting as we do with these cool guests that we are fortunate enough to find to come talk to us for a little while. So tell a friend, give us a review, whatever it takes.
Absolutely. I do have to say that when Andy said that you were going to be on, he actually asked me what I thought about having a lawyer on the show. Mm-hmm. And I said, it depends.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. 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 I told him, well, she won't be our lawyer. And
exactly.
He said, well,
exactly.
It still depends.
All right.
And I'm going to bill in 6-minute increments. So. Mm-hmm.
Oh, now she tells us. You didn't sign anything, did you, Jerry?
Not yet.
Oh, man.
Damn it. All right. Thank you, everybody.
We better get that sponsorship in a hurry.
That's right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
See you next time. Bye.